Good day, South Africa. Yet another sinister awarding of a tender by the South African government has been exposed by the DA, and this time it involves the Risk Mitigation Independent Power Producers Program, or the RMI Quadruple P. It has been established that the most recent attempt to approve the emergency 218 billion rands power ships deal with Turkish power ship company Karadeniz and their BEE partner Power Group South Africa are riddled with cronyism and a flouting of tender regulations. Former State Security Ministers David Mahlobo and Bongani Bongo's advisor, lawyer George Mokoena, is a 20% shareholder of Power Group SA, who together with Karadeniz have formed a conglomerate called Car Power Ship SA and have won the bid for emergency power contracts to counter the impact of Eskom's load shedding. As per our Competition Act number 89 of 1998, Chapter 2, Part A, Section 4, Subsection 1B 3, which covers the restrictive horizontal practices prohibited in South Africa, the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, or the DMRE, is clearly in a transgression of legislation in the above-mentioned awarding of the tender to the chosen consortium in that, quote, Section 4, Subsection 1, an agreement between or concerted practice by firms or a decision by an association of firms is prohibited if it is between parties in a horizontal relationship and if B. It involves any of the following restrictive horizontal practices. 3. Collusive tendering, unquote. Additionally, there has been a disregarding of the mandatory environmental impact assessment, or EIA, prior to receiving the tender by Car Power Ship SA, and the DMRE is overseeing this exclusion from the list of requirements from bidders in this case. The DMRE is using the prevalence of COVID-19 to conveniently omit the EIA prerequisite, while Karadeniz is seeking to use the Section 30A of the National Environmental Management Act, or NEMA, as a legal basis to avoid this much-needed safety precaution. Such a high-risk project requiring liquefied natural gas, or LNG, to be loaded onto ships and transported to a regasification terminal where LNG is warmed up and reconverted into gas cannot be hastily carried out in hindsight of numerous deadly disasters which have been recorded since the technology's initial conception. This latest discrepancy, which adds to the long list of the South African government's legislative tender illicitness, has even caught the attention of the British House of Lords, as there has been a court challenge launched by Lord Peter Haines' DNG Power Holdings Company, which intends to bring to book the DMRE for, quote, underhanded and corruptive activity, unquote. Should this LNG project proceed, Car Power Ship South Africa would be responsible for 1,220 megawatts of the 1,850 megawatts appropriated amongst the 8 preferred bidders selected by the DMRE, and allow a graph-driven dominance of this initiative for the next 2 decades. As party to this power ships deal, Mokoena is in his second unscrupulous energy deal of immense proportions, as he was also involved in the failed R1 trillion nuclear project from the previous presidency. 4 years ago, saw the DA's revealing of the nepotism-motivated selection of a law firm by the Competition Commission, or CC, whose principal partner is the former head of training and development in the very CC's cartels division, to work on cartel cases alone, and consequently benefiting over 10 million rands in legal payments. Proving to being merely a repetition of our ruling party's behavior when coming to appointing suitable subcontractors for parastatal projects is the latest disruption of the Portfolio Committee of the DMRE's investigations into the processes of the RMI Quadruple P. Kevin Malham, Member of Parliament and DA Shadow Minister of Mineral Resources, is reporting on the DA's actions in processing further charges. Inasmuch as the chimpanzee has contributed towards the development of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine in countering the COVID-19 spread around the world, the octopus has also been a subject of many an experiment in the understanding of animal thinking processes. The Moderna COVID-19 vaccine has been manufactured by Harvard Medical School personnel whose other invention, the modern anesthetic, has been regularly used on octopus operations, unlike on other creatures without skeletons, purely due to the high level of this aquatic animal's intelligence. This was confirmed through the extensive studies done by proponents of the American Psychologists Association, or the APA, including sightings by Dr. Wayne Whiten, who has reported on the ability of the above-mentioned organism's ability to open a screw-top jar in order to access the contents of the jar. We are in the midst of a great medical advancement for the world, which is seeing the South African Arts and Culture Department being put in a position of being honored and given credit for the further garnering of educational facts pertaining to this marine life component. Being awarded an Academy Award for a documentary film is a most revered feat in the world of cinematography and science for South African filmmakers Pippa Ehrlich and James Reed. Such an award puts them in a group of laureates which is unrivaled and largely makes up the authorities of the world's intelligentsia. Ever since the very first Academy Awards were held at a venue named after the cousin of Harvard University alumna, former President of the US, Franklin D. Roosevelt, this event has been the standard for achievement in the field of film. As the US's premier recognition of works by filmmakers, the Academy Awards are audited by PricewaterhouseCoopers, who are the accounting authorities of the world. Additionally, the list of laureates include UN ambassadors and leaders. Winners of Oscar awards of past, such as filmmakers and executive producers who work at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, have been the ones taking humanity to the future in terms of inventions and the stretching of human knowledge bounds. As representatives of our local heritage, these South African filmmakers have to be fully supported by our Arts and Culture Department, including our Science Department, just as the Heritage Act No. 25 of 1999's Chapter 3, Section 3, Subsection 43, Section 1 allows in that, quote, Section 43, Subsection 1, on advice from SAHRA, the South African Heritage Resources Agency, the Minister, in concurrence with the Minister of Finance, may publish regulations for the conservation of heritage resources which form part of the national estate, unquote. In order for our country to be able to acquire an adequate supply of vaccines to quell the rapid rise of COVID-19 inventions, our Science Department has to be as compliant as possible with the requisites of the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, and its fellow specialized organ, the World Health Organization, or WHO. By fixing the poor managing of UNESCO-ranked national assets and improving the state of our roads, we will gain the support of the above-mentioned organs, while the expediting of our digital migration will earn us some lauding from the International Telecommunications Union, or ITU. Tsepo Mhlongo, DA Shadow Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, is congratulating Craig Foster and his film crew for the outstanding recognition they have earned themselves, including our country. During this uncertain time with regards to the COVID-19 infection rate trajectory, what's certain is the buckling state of our health establishments in their efforts to manage the influx of disease-infected corpses. The level of desperation to normalize processes is extended to funeral and burial service providers, such as one of the largest, namely AVBOB, who have installed last month an additional 22 improvised morgue facilities in the form of shipping containers to assist the 250 units around the country. AVBOB has decided that the best way to leverage the COVID-19 induced death scourge is to use these 12-meter long, 40 plastic-wrapped, highly contagious corpses storing containers whose internal temperature is kept at 0 degrees Celsius. Due to the rapid instances of fatalities around the country, funeral parlors owners are reporting that they have reached a point where bodies are stacking up so greatly that they're now finding themselves waiting at cemeteries while graves are being dug. Another delaying component of timely burials is the manufacturing of coffins, as the death speed has created the need for bereaved families members to wait longer to receive coffins to bury their loved ones in. In addition to the Secretary General of the South African Funeral Practitioners Association, or SAFPA, Ludwig Ramatoka, being perturbed by the negative reputation of being unreliable which undertakers are developing as a result of the slowing down of services, there is also a fear which has engulfed the death care industry of staff contracting COVID-19. According to the National Health Act No. 61 of 2003's Chapter 8, Section 68, Subsection 1C, it is the Health Minister's responsibility to address any troublesome situations regarding our nation's morgues, as the following citing reveals. Quote, Subsection 1. The Minister may make regulations regarding C. The removal of donated tissue or cells from persons, tissue or cells obtained from post-mortem examinations, and the procurement, processing, storage, supply and allocation of tissue or human cells by institutions and persons. Unquote. We should be careful not to turn into a secret-ridden state like other countries who persecute members of the public who report on the realities of the COVID-19 spread. It is through the admission of our health department of the current strain that our country is under that we will be able to put up a comprehensive resistance against this deadly antigen. As far back as in January this year, our funeral parlor industry personnel were under immense pressure as they were already working overtime due to burials having to be carried out more often than ever before. The 55,772 total COVID-19 deaths recorded in South Africa represent 2% of the global total, and this is alarming and should be reason enough to ensure that there is always transparency in the official announcements thereof, especially since discrepancies pertaining to the accuracy of these statistics have been exposed by the government's Coronavirus Advisory Committee. COVID-19's onset has served, first of all, as a highlighting factor, and secondly, as a worsening development to the historically appalling nature of our state's morgues, where 9 years ago there were findings of the illegal sale and concealment of corpses to unregistered funeral parlors. Jack Bloom, Gauteng Shadow MEC of Health, is updating us on the latest happenings whose problems have been compounded by COVID-19. Thank you.
Oh.